There we go.
Okay, good, great.
And
And
then one other request, if everyone could mute their microphones and turn off the video, I think we'll have a smoother presentation. And John, if you'd like to take questions, we can either do it through the chat room or just anyone could ask you depending on your preference.
yeah, I'll cover that. Thank you again.
Okay.
Let's address that right away. My presentations, I would prefer to do the presentation first. If you have things and you're like me, you can't remember long enough to put them in the chat, go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A, but let's wait until the end for questions. I think that works better. So again, thank you for inviting me back. I appreciate that. And I saw Arvid was here. Arvid had a wonderful question the other day. I hope at the end, Arvid, that we can have a discussion and maybe see if we've answered your question, as I promised we would try to do tonight. The other thing too is I'm going to save you the effort of having to make notes. I've made what I call lecture notes for you. And those lecture notes will include all the key concepts that I will speak about tonight. Any of the quotations that are mine and or that I might have used from other people will be included in those lecture notes. And then just as my way of saying thank you for coming tonight, I'll include an ebook that I've published called Photograph What Makes Your Heart Sing. And everybody will get a copy of that as well. I'll send an email to whomever I should, I guess, and it'll have a thank you note from me as well as those 2 PDF documents that you can use. So with that, I thought I'd be speaking to a whole bunch of people and I'm just looking at names. Doing this is very different than live things. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Excuse me. Looks like I'm sharing a whiteboard. How did that happen? Hold on. I don't know what's going on there. Hang tight. Let's do that again. Share screen. Whiteboard. Well, folks, I'm seeing something I've never seen before. Did somebody give me a different ability to share here? Because I'm not seeing the ability to share my screen. I've never seen this before. Well, let me try this because there isn't a, let's see. Can everybody see that?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting because normally I'm able to share my entire screen and that only gave me very limited choices. I've never seen that. Okay. All right. So master your craft and honor your vision. Where I like to talk about where these come from actually. And all 3 of my, what I would call keynote style presentations come from, number 1, my experience as a photographer. That's all I really have to draw on, right? Is my journey and how I've come to this place where I am this moment in time. But it's also from doing roughly, I don't know, 200 workshops and tours over the last 10 plus years. And observing others, it comes from having deep conversations about photography with the likes of Cole Thompson and Chuck Kimmerly and Mitch DeBrowner and Sarah Marino and others, and who I respect and admire their photography. And so these thoughts are, you know, this is not a how-to presentation whatsoever, really. It has a little bit of that in it, different than what you folks have seen, which is, I'm sure a lot of you have seen my Dream, Believe, Create. Has some of those thoughts in here as well. But what I really hope to talk about is this idea of, you know, mastering craft and what is craft, and I'll talk about that. And then what the heck is vision? Because vision is one of those words that's somewhat difficult to define, and there needs to be some context in my mind. So let's get started with this. First and foremost, I think we all know that having a really good camera, whether it be a, you know, Olympus or a Fuji, I'm a Fuji guy, but then of course, you know, there's those Sony snobs, and the Sony snobs say that, John, you don't have a full frame camera and a full frame sensor. You need to get a Sony because that will assure that you have good pictures. But then I finally met somebody who actually owned a Leica, and he looked at me with total disdain that I didn't have a red dot on my camera. So what I did though is, look, I don't know if you can see this, but I got a red dot thing that I put on my shutter release on my Fuji. So now I think I probably can make images like a Leica now. But then of course, Tony Sweet, you know, he's a Nikon guy, and he says, John, if you're going to make good photographs, you gotta have Nikon gear. And then Cole Thompson, when I met him, said, my gosh, John, no, you got it all wrong. In order to make good photographs, you need to join the Canon team. Because if you've got Canon gear, I mean, all you got to do is point it at stuff and you got good pictures. Well, you know, the reality is, I think we know that that's just crazy, right? It's not about the gear. As a matter of fact, you know, from this craft side of things, an iPhone and Droid phones, for that matter, are fantastic cameras. And if you understand that gear and what to do with it, you can make great images. So it's really not about all the camera that we're speaking about tonight, because cameras are not what make good images. You do. You're responsible for every square millimeter of your frame. You're responsible for the techniques, the knowledge of image processing, and all those things that you gain mastery of. That's your job. But ultimately, cameras have nothing to do with creating imagery. You do. And you do that by mastering your craft. But I would say that even more important than mastery of craft, you make images that make your heart sing, those ones that take your breath away, whether they're the images that you see that others have made or you make. I would say that it's the heart that's part of that image creation process, or that heart that's singing of yours as you're listening to those images by embracing your vision. So let's first talk about the craft side a little bit. Ansel said, you know, the way to art is through craft. It's not around it. So Ansel understood, like most, I think now understand, that craft is really important so that you can make art. So what would that mean? What does it mean to master your craft? Well, these are some of my thoughts. First and foremost, it would mean that you need to understand your equipment so well that it gets out of the way. I'm a huge fan of wooden instruments, and this is my ukulele and pictures of me with the ukulele. You know, in order to be able to play the ukulele or the guitar that I have, or the mandolin that I have, or the tuba, trumpet, and baritone horns that I played, you need to understand the notes and what combination of valves or strings to press in order to be able. I need to know that, so much so that it gets out of the way of the creative process. So first and foremost, we need to understand that gear so well that it indeed gets out of the way, so that we can start to learn more about techniques like image camera movement, or what I refer to as swipes, where I'm moving my camera over a fifth of a second, fourth, fifth, sixth, something like that, at a certain speed out in the Palouse at Steptoe Butte here. And I get something other than a straight representative image of this moment, but maybe more of a expression of how I was feeling about the quality of the light and what I was seeing and feeling at that time. And to me, this is much more expressive of the feeling I was having. Multiple exposures. You know, if we understand that more and more cameras in the digital world are having that, Nikon and Canon, and even my Fujis now finally have more than two. They've got, I think, 10 multiple exposures. But you need to understand the technique and the process of creating a multiple exposure, so that when that moment of inspiration happens, the vision side that we'll get to a little bit later here, that you understand the craft, if you will, of a multiple exposure. So that once again, when you see a stand of trees like this, you know that, hey, if I do small increments and I can make something that might be more artistic or have more of a feeling of art, or again, represent how I was feeling. So craft then, in my mind, would involve things like depth of field and understanding that if I want that greenery in the background to go out of focus, how do I do that? I need to understand depth of field is created by, or is affected by, distance to subject, angle of view of the lens, and f-stop, and arguably size of the sensor too, I guess, if you want to add that in there to complicate matters. But knowing that if I'm at Longwood Gardens, and you all know that they don't like you jumping in the water, they tend to kick you out. But if I'm at Longwood Gardens and I can't get the plane of my camera parallel to those two lotuses, well, I need to make some creative choices. And that's kind of understanding the craft side of it. Well, how do I do that? If I want that background flower to be out of focus, well, maybe I need to be open at 5/6. And if I go to f13, I get more of that background flower in focus. If I go to f22, I get both of those flowers in focus. So knowing the craft side leads you to this situation where you're saying, man, I love these dancing evergreens. I love the relationship and the conversation they're having. But if I want to get most of the evergreens, the background looks horrific. Well, I need to make a creative choice with my craft knowledge to say, but if I go to f5/6, hey, that'll throw that background out of focus, which is much more pleasing to the eye, but still leave enough of the greenery in focus, enough to make it just fine. The craft equation in my mind has to do with whether I do color or whether I go black and white. And we certainly have a very different reaction to those choices. And I would say that we should make that choice with great intent, not just, hey, I think I'll convert that to black and white. We really want to use it to portray a feeling that we're having. Understanding the effect of a polarizer. In my mind, this is a throwaway photograph. But I realized that if I put a polarizer on, it changes the whole thing. It gets rid of that glare and it warms up those colors, takes the glare off the leaves and the water, and now the blue sky that was always there looks great. So knowing that is part of the craft equation. And remembering that a polarizer is not an on-off switch. It can be no polarizer. It can be some polarization where you still see some of the shadow, or full polarization where we get rid of the entire shadows that's being cast and then just get the beautiful flower. Which one of those is correct? The one that works best for you. Just make sure you understand that they're all available. So texture overlay, understanding that I can take this color scene, make it black and white. And in this particular case, I even inverted it and made it a negative, if you will, so that I could then combine it with a piece of texture and get another right answer. Right, but that's vision driven, but it's understanding the techniques and the crafting side of the equation that allows me to say, okay, I can do that. Yeah, so I can take a bald blue sky day where we used to be really frustrated. Dag nabbit, I didn't get the conditions I was hoping for. Well, that's okay. It just gives me something else to do today. How about diffuse glow? I can understand how that technique works so that I can make an f8 shot and get my background flowers kind of out of focus, the foreground flower mostly in focus. I can use 200 millimeters because I need a long lens. I'm going to throw it out of focus, making it bigger. Hopefully you'll see that happen. It gets a little bigger there. And then I combine the two of those and I get something that looks like the old diffuse glow or Orton effect in the film days. Understanding the effects of shutter speed. A quarter of a second, and then I'm on a tripod. I'm not going to move my composition at all. You can register by that stick in the top center. And here I'm just going to go from a quarter of a second to about 125th of a second. It's just knowledge of those capabilities and the craft side of the equation that helped me to make a decision. How do I want to render that moving water scene? And then we get to Molokai, where we have hopefully the opportunity. You don't always get it, but the time when we go in February is generally when the big waves are happening. And the beach there in Molokai, Papahaku, is situated in a way it's like a crescent, and so you can get to this angle and get these really nice angles. But waves are moving fast, and so there's a lot of craft knowledge involved here. We need to know that we've got to be in manual exposure mode so that we can dial in f8, we can dial in 2000ths of a second, we can go to what we call floating ISO, where we go to auto ISO. So the only thing that's changing is the ISO is trying to get the correct exposure. The f8 and f2000s, we want to lock those in, and then we got to be on continuous high with some wide tracking, AFC, right, for continuous, so that when we're firing off 6 or 8 or 12 images at a time. You know, it's a lot to think about. And we actually spend, before we go photograph the waves, we spend an hour making sure everybody's cameras are dialed in and they understand how to get auto ISO. So craft is really, really important. You know, another thought is, and I just had a meeting with my friends at Lens Baby today because I am one of their ambassadors, and the ambassadors got together. But a Lens Baby can be a challenge. But what I love about the Lens Baby is it forces me to see and then tell you, the viewer, what the most important part of the image might be. Because physiologically, we go to that bright spot first, and then we go to the sharp spot next. And so all that beautiful radial Lens Baby blur is just kind of holding us into the scene. Kind of a unique situation here, right? We think we're going to go to the bright spots. I don't. I go to that sharp driver in the cab in Times Square, and then everything else becomes interesting. And then Lens Baby has the Velvet series lenses, which offer some nice soft focus. These are all, in my mind, you know, they do fall into that vision thing that we'll talk about, but understanding how they work, in my mind, is more of a craft thing, and understanding all of these things I've been talking about so far and how they affect your image. Of course, we're photographers, so we better understand the quality of light and the value of being patient and waiting for the cloud to come by so that we have light on the tree. The quality of light is going to be different in the 20 minutes before the sunrise happens at Pemaquid, and we get a very different looking and feeling image as we're getting closer and closer to sunrise. And then the sun finally comes up and we have warm light versus cool light, right? Understanding those things is, in my mind, more part of the craft side. Focal length, how does that affect depth of field? Well, you know, I'm out in Yellowstone, and I'm quite a long distance away, racked out at 300 millimeters. Well, I better be mindful that, you know, the longer that focal length, I'm going to lose depth of field, and there's a fair amount from front to back on this image. So I better be at f16 or somewhere around there to make sure that I have front to back sharpness. Whereas, you know, if I go on the boardwalk and turn around about 50 feet and head back towards the car, you see this type of scene, and, you know, I accidentally photographed this at f4. I forgot to check. It was all fine. Why? Because a wide angle lens inherently has a lot of depth of field. So knowing that long focal lengths, you know, telephotos have less depth of field and widers have more, those are good things to know about. So ultimately what I'm saying in this first craft part of the discussion is, we need to understand our craft so well that we're freed from its constraints and liberated to pursue our vision. Liberated to pursue the vision, right? So know all that craft side. Just like I say, knowing the camera so well that it gets out of the way, I also want to be freed up of the constraints of all the other stuff so that I understand those things so well that I'm really focused on vision. So great. What the heck is vision? Well, very simply put, vision for me in the context of this discussion is your view or my view of the world based on your life experiences. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about vision being something that I have a vision for what my images should look like. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about vision in the sense that I'm going to go out with this vision in mind and create this. I'm talking about getting in touch with the fact that you are a unique individual, a unique human being with your own set of life experiences that then are going to be applied to the image making process. So what I'm saying is, vision is something that develops over time. We can't force it. We don't go out and say, what the heck is my vision, you will understand it if you're open to the possibilities of saying, hey, what is my vision? What is my vision of life? And then apply that to your photograph. So it'll develop over time. It's not being forced. And why is it constantly changing? Because you, hopefully, as a human being, are constantly changing. You're learning new things hopefully in this dialogue tonight. You're viewing new movies. You're reading new books, and so forth. And all those things are informing your vision. So we each have one. Cole Thompson, who speaks a lot about vision, and he and I have become very good friends. That's the discussion we have all the time as we're traveling together. And the reality is, he thought, I don't have a vision. I don't even know what it is. Well, after 2 years of kind of searching, he realized he does have a vision, and he realized what's informing that. But there's no right or wrong. Yours isn't better than mine. It's just different because you're a different human being. So what are you really doing then? I would say this: as you're photographing, here's what you're bringing. You're bringing you, all of you, informed by, when you make photographs, informed by your fears and your passions, your likes, your biases, the daily grind, the failed marriage, the recent death in the family, the lousy day at work, COVID and all of the challenges it's brought, the loneliness, the sadness that you're feeling, all those things are affecting or informing, as I like to say, your vision. So to be able to connect with our vision, I would say then we need to learn to see more deeply. And as I thought about how to express my feelings, I've had the pleasure to work with Freeman Patterson in South Africa, and I felt like Freeman says it so well, let's just use Freeman. So here's what Freeman says. He says, seeing in the finest and broadest sense means using your senses, your intellect, and your emotions. So isn't that interesting? So seeing in the finest and broadest sense means using your senses, your intellect, and your emotions. It means encountering your subject with your whole being. So not just with your eyes. It means looking beyond the labels of things and discovering the remarkable world around you. Man, there's a whole lot wrapped up in that quote. So he goes on to say, the person who sees is involved. The person who's just merely looking about is not. Good seeing does not ensure good photographs, but good photographic expression is impossible without it. So, what are the things that get in the way of this deeper level of seeing? And maybe how do we get to that deeper level of seeing? Well, I would say preoccupation with self. Hard to get rid of. Heck, we have so much going on in our lives, so much that we're dealing with on a daily basis. It's hard not to be preoccupied with oneself. But if that's where your head's at as you're going to do the creative process, or you're involving yourself in the creative process, and in this case, making photographs, those little voices are going to get in the way. So letting go of that self-centeredness or that preoccupation with our own daily grind and the overwhelming feeling of COVID and all those things is kind of essential. It's a precondition, if you will, to real seeing, to where we get to be quiet and still, so that those voices those I guess I want to call them almost the baggage of all that stuff you're bringing to the act of photography is getting out of the way of the ability to see. How about this one? Oh my gosh, it is so easy to get this phone and start looking through Instagram and, an hour and a half later, you're done. You just get sucked into it, right? And Facebook and so forth. I mean, there's so much going on in and around us that sometimes we don't make space for that quiet. And to me, of all the ones that Freeman taught me about as we studied together, is this idea of letting go of labels. You know, things are not good or bad. They're not pretty or ugly. A face is an oval, as Freeman would teach. A scene, you know, very simple ocean scene is two rectangles. It's not sand and water. It's two rectangles, which then are building blocks to be able to then make something very simple in a composition that feels right. People are not, you know, pretty or ugly. They're just people. And sometimes if we get rid of even just people and say that they're a shape, they're a circle, and we're going to use those shapes in certain ways. There's not good light and bad light, as Freeman taught me. There's just light. Think about it as light. And then what do you do with the light that you're given, rather than, again, searching and grasping for something that you think might make it better? And if you don't believe Freeman or me, how about Monet? Does that work? In order to see, we must forget the name of the thing we're looking at. So stop looking at things and labeling them good, bad. You know, an evergreen tree is a triangle. Things like that. Whoops, went too fast. So if you are going to have a vision, you know, I would say, and then you want to apply that vision towards your craft of photography in this case, I would say then have a vision for your life, not for your images. The images will be a reflection of your life and who you are, because that's going to be slathered all over them. And maybe this will help. I think about Stevie Ray Vaughan, who I adore as a blues guitar player. And, you know, when I know him in 3 or 4 notes, I know it's Stevie Ray Vaughan. Why? Because his vision is slathered all over the strings. I mean, his life is being played on those strings, right? So, and that life, or his vision, if you will, is being informed by all of the other players that he's listened to, the difficulty, the drugs, all whatever, right? And that is what's happening in my mind. So again, your images then should be an extension of who you are, which I'm calling vision. Because really, it's not a matter of what you look at. I'm sorry, it's not what you look at that matters. Rather, it's what you see. I'm always amazed that I can be standing at the same location with 12 photographers on a workshop. And we get back and I say, hey, did you enjoy that little pond that we stopped at on the side of the road in New Hampshire? Can I see what you got? And it's completely different than what I got. You know, because everybody sees in a different way, and we're seeing based on our life experiences. So who should we start to listen to then to make images that are uniquely ours? Should we listen to a master of fine art who might be your mentor, to the 500px or the Facebook or the Instagram crowd? Is that who we should be getting our feedback from? Friends and family, club members? Well, let's explore a couple of those and maybe throw some cautions out there for you. So this was such a powerful experience. I asked Cole if I might share it as part of my presentation. So Cole had a friend who was a master's of fine art, and she was his mentor. And this was the first image that he ever made where he really tried to apply his thinking over 2 years about what vision was about and how he might start to make images that are from that. And so he did a long exposure of this gentleman named Gabriel, and the name of the image became Angel Gabriel. And he asked Gabriel, who was a homeless man, to stop and pose on the Santa Monica Pier for 30 seconds because he wanted to let those people move out of the way, right? When people are moving through 30 seconds, we generally don't see them, except for those few that, looks like 4 of them that were standing there long enough that they did get some of the movement. And so he immediately sent this very image to his mentor friend, and she, without even waiting 5 seconds, emailed him back and said, Cole, how many times have I told you that you should not center your image, center your subject in an image? And so he was like, whoa, okay, all right, well, let me go back. So he went and he said, okay, maybe this is what she's talking about. That doesn't feel right. Maybe she's talking more about this. Man, that just doesn't feel right. And he, as Cole tells the story, he got physically ill because what felt right to him and everybody else I've ever showed the series of images to is this one. So while having a mentor friend can be helpful, there's some merit in that. We need to be careful that and remember that that mentor friend is giving feedback based on whose vision? Theirs, based on their preferences, their likes, by what they're being informed by. Nobody knows more about your vision than you. Why would you allow somebody else to give input onto what you're trying to create? How about chasing likes versus honoring your vision? These are old images of 500 pics when I actually was thinking it was fun to do, and then I realized it just didn't fit with who I was or what I was trying to accomplish with my personal journey with photography. You know, back in the day, though, you tried to make it to the first page. That was the big goal, you know? And so my buddy Donnie saw my images and said, hey, I think I'm going to give it a try. I said, yeah, give it a try, Donnie. We were on a workshop. And so the first image he posts is this one. And I was like, Donnie, that's, you know, fantastic. Kind of fun, isn't it, Donnie? Look at him. If you look, there's he's popular at the bottom right there. So he's even popular. That's nice. He reached the highest pulse of 98.5, 3,400 views. I mean, not bad. And so he goes out there and he's going to post another image. So I said, you know, and he posted this one. And I went, hey, Donnie, good job. Even more, 5,400 people looked at it and you're still popular, which is great. And you got a lot of likes and 121 people are making a favorite. But Donnie, when we were on the workshop last week, you showed me an image that you couldn't wait for me to see. And you were so excited about it. Remember, it was kind of that grunged up, you used a texture as a tree. How come I haven't seen that one? You were so excited last week to show me that. It's probably not going to do well on 500 pics. I said, well, what's that got to do with anything? Is that why you're doing 500 px, to do well? Or you want to show people the work that's exciting you, that makes your heart sing? Okay, John, you know, I'll go ahead and post it. I knew it would happen. I knew exactly what would happen, but I wanted to try to teach. So, you know, he's only fresh. He's not popular. He fell out of the popular group. You know, one person faved it, probably his mother. 8 people liked it, his family and me. You know, so what happened? And more importantly, the next question I asked him was, now what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to posting images that please the viewers of 500 pics? Are you only going to make images that you think will please them? Or are you going to honor your vision and post images that you love? What are you going to do? He couldn't answer that right away, and that's okay. And you might need to think about that a little bit. So here I am. Man, I'm popular. I even got bigger, higher score than Donnie. I've got more views, more likes. I'm going to do the same thing just to show Donnie. I post this image, which I still to this day love. It bombed. I mean, nobody cared. One fave, just like Donnie's, right? But does that mean I'm not going to share this? I'm not going to enjoy it as part of my portfolio? My gosh, no, I'm going to continue to enjoy it because I love this photograph. I actually had a gentleman one day tell me that he uses 500 px as a measuring stick for whether he will keep an image or throw it away. And I'm not talking about throw it away from a folio or something. He throws the file away forever if it doesn't reach a certain pulse. It's just amazing to me that he would allow a 500 px audience to determine what is good or bad. rather than his own vision of what is right and wrong. How about family and friends? That's always good. I come home from my first trip to Iceland. I show my wife this image as the very first one, and she kind of looks at me with a blank stare and says, "You went to Iceland and this is what you're going to show me?" I said, "Yeah, isn't it cool? It's this really in your face, black and white." And, she just didn't get it. I went to the Palouse for probably my, 10th time, and I was just into this black and white moment and graphic designs. And so that was the first one. And, she's seen other Palouse images from the prior 9 years, right? And I said, honey, this is great. I love this. And she, again, blank stare. Are you kidding me? I go to South Africa. I come home, and this is the first X-Pan I show her. This was film days. And again, same thing. She says, so you went all the way to South Africa to find, I believe this was a Chevy truck. You could have found that at the junkyard right here in Pennsylvania. She just doesn't understand that the patina on the trucks in South Africa is way, 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 way different than it is here in Pennsylvania. So that helped her understand. And then my mother, who's now 97 and in better shape than I am, I'm with Chuck Kimmerly, who might be one of the funniest people I've ever met. And we're just having a blast bringing the group to this situation, the outhouse, and I ran and pulled up the toilet seat. And I think it's a hysterically funny photograph. And my mother looked at me and she just says, son, I don't ever want to see another picture like that. So that didn't go over well with mom. So who do you listen to? Do you listen to like Cole learned not to, the MFA mentor? Do you listen to the audiences at 500 Pics and Instagram and Facebook and whoever else you want to share with? Do you listen to friends and family? No. I'm suggesting that you listen to you. These are images that you're making from your own heart, and they should be images that make your heart sing. Nobody else's. If they make somebody else's, that's great. That's bonus. That's icing on the cake. But I know who I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for me first and foremost. So first and foremost, I need to trust me, that I do have a vision, that I do have the ability to go and be still and allow images to appear, to allow them to come to me. Because ultimately that's the process. And that was the big shift for me. When I started focusing on vision, and more importantly, to make it more concrete, when I stopped chasing and rather started allowing myself to be taken, then making an image of what was taking me, that's when my photography changed. As Ricky Cook says at our contemplative photography retreat in Molokai, and he's got 22 years of Nat Geo experience, he says, I photograph what makes me say, wow. So he's photographing wow, and forces us that as we're out together as a group to, when somebody says wow, he literally looks and says, okay, gotta stop. And whether you make a good picture or a bad picture, it doesn't matter. It's training yourself to stop for a wow and photograph it. Because see, you have experiences, which is part of vision, and talents exclusive to you. So you just need to trust and believe that you do. So we talked about some barriers. Let's talk about a few more that might, in fact, get in the way, like lack of confidence or fears, uncertainties and doubts, something that I like to refer to as FUD, or expectations, or rules, others' opinions, competitions. Always makes me wince to say that out loud, especially when I just heard of the competitions your club is working towards. But I think I can explain and make myself clear on that. Lack of technique, I should probably say lack of technique, or missing the tools to be able to do what you want. So let's talk about a couple of these in that list a little more deeply. I would encourage you to be careful with those pesky little feelings of inadequacy. You know, when other people are having joy and success, that's about them and where they are in their journey with photography. It's not about you. You're just fine right where you are because that's where you are today. And you have X amount of information, knowledge about photography. It's going to grow. You're going to learn by trial and error and all those things. So while we can't avoid feelings of inadequacy, we can certainly be mindful, meet them gently, and lovingly push them aside. And then beware of the expectations that we're piling on ourselves or for our imagery. But let me tell you a better way and how powerful it was. Although the images I'm going to show you from both the Smokies and the Palouse coming up here are mine, these were taken on the same trip. So Dan Sniffen and I did 40 tours together over 10 years. We were tour partners together. And when he got to the Smokies this year, it was the last year we were going to do tours together because he's 10 years older than I am. And he wanted to just stop, or 15 years older than I am, actually. And so he said, John, you know, normally I bring a list of my shot list with me to the Smokies or wherever we went. He would say to me, John, I want to do this, 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 and this. He had a list of paper on a piece of paper, and that's what he wanted to make sure to get. So John, don't worry about me. I'm probably going to be in the car and I'm not going to be making images, and I might sit in the car and take a nap. I've been to the Smokies 10 years in a row, and I'll be fine. So don't worry about me, John. Well, at the end of the week of shooting together, I went over to his computer and I said, how'd it go? And he showed me 12 images, and they were spectacular. One of them was an image that's almost identical to this because we pulled around a corner, we saw this, and our jaws fell in our lap and we had to run to make this image. So we happened to have this one very much alike, but his other 11 were very different than mine. And I would say without a shadow of a doubt that they were the best set of images I've ever seen from the Smokies. So what was different? What was different is that he arrived and he photographed for that week with zero expectations. So we go to the Palouse about a month later, and he says, John, remember the Smokies? That worked pretty well. I'm going to do the same thing. I don't have a shot list. I don't have expectations. I'm just going to ride around with you. And if we see something like a red barn and yellow canola, I'm probably going to make a photograph. Right? And so guess what happened? We went for a plane ride and made photographs from the air. The same identical thing happened. At the end of that week, I went and looked at his computer, and I don't know how many, whether there were 12 or 14 or 16, it doesn't matter. What really mattered was the same, and he'd been to the Palouse probably 18 times, way more than I had. He's the one who introduced me to the area. I mean, the same identical result, the best images he's ever created on his 19th time. So rather than the expectation, go and be open to that another right answer is really what we're talking about, right? So the expectation from Dalen was go to Philadelphia, go to the old coal pier, and he's a Rocky fanatic. Let me dress up like I'm Rocky. And let me have you get a picture of me with my beloved Philadelphia in the background. Nailed it, done, let's go have breakfast. No, that's not what we're gonna do, because as I'm walking in there, I'm thinking, holy cow, there are so many other right answers. Why would I just go home? Hey, Dalen, would you stand at the end here? Would you pose like a boxer here? Hey, Dalen, look at the light. If you go over there, I can get you shadow boxing against that wall. How cool would that be? And if I turn my camera vertical, I'll get another answer to the image that I just loved from that session. But if I'd gone with that expectation rather than open to another right answer and another right answer, they would never have happened. But being open to whatever was calling me, saying wow, etc. So let me try to drill that home. I would say it like this. Ricky says, photograph wow. I say be open to that moment of perception. that turns your head. And I think you know what I mean. It's when you're walking and you either hear something or you see something and you just do that quick look with your head. That's what we're talking about here. There's something that's calling to you. It's catching your attention. Pay attention to that and photograph it. So again, back to Yellowstone. Just give me a second here. Get a drink, thank you. I went the day before and I photographed Grand Prismatic Spring, and this is what I got. We're just too late. I missed the really good morning light, and see, there I go again. I'm good at it, just like everybody else is. I just labeled the light. I missed the blue sky with the light that was happening that morning, and I said, I'd like to go back and see what it looks like tomorrow to Dan as we were doing our scouting. But as we were going to go to Grand Prismatic Springs, we're going over that footbridge for those who've been out there, and I did one of those moments of perception. I looked out the corner of my eye and I went, holy cow, big time wow. And then you have that little mental argument with yourself, right? You go, but I missed the springs yesterday. That's what I'm here for. That's my expectation. That's the right answer, is to go there because that's what I came for. But what I almost missed was this. Now, for me, this is what I would put into the category of my top 10 best images ever. Image of a lifetime. That's what made me say, wow, that day. And I never got to Grand Prismatic Spring, and I still don't have a good picture from Grand Prismatic Spring. I don't care, because what I have is a moment of a lifetime. And you know how many photographers walked by me with tripods over their shoulders this day? About 150. And none of them stopped. It just boggled my mind. I mean, not only is it a great scene and you got these fumaroles steaming like crazy, but I got a fisherman down there. Are you kidding? I mean, I couldn't have asked for him to be in a better position. So that's what I'm talking about, is being open. So to do that, though, we got to kind of show up, mentally, spiritually, physically. All of these things are important. As on this day when I was in Cape Cod and we hired Mike to row his red dory, a very unique dory, of which there were only 3 of on Cape Cod. We're having a grand old time photographing Mike and his red dory, and the light was so incredibly beautiful that morning. It was so beautiful that we didn't even have to process the images. You looked at the raw file and you said, oh, done, make it a JPEG. It was that good. And we just had a grand old time. And then I went back because I was going to do another workshop starting the next day after this, back-to-back week-long workshops. So I went back to the hotel, took a nap, and woke up and I looked out the window. I said, oh, good. There's some overcast. I was thinking of going to Paynes Creek, but you know what? That's probably not going to work out. So I'll just stay and get a longer nap. But I get that nagging guy on the other shoulder saying, no, you should go, John, you should go. But yeah, but I really need sleep. And so I got in my car and I went, and I arrived at Paynes Creek and I went, okay. It looks like maybe it was the right choice to go ahead and come and stop being worried. Not bad, good start. And then I looked to my right over the shoulder about 10 minutes after this. I went, whoa, that's where the ball game's happening right now. And I had this Merlot sky happening, and then worked that for about 10, 15 minutes. And I said, I better look back at the sunset. And I went, oh my goodness, that thing's on fire. So I started pointing my camera in that direction. And then I pointed the other direction because, man, that sky was getting that beautiful blue and the pink and the clouds. And guess what? The same identical, insane quality of light that I had that morning, I got it again, raking over these grasses. Most memorable day of shooting I think I've ever had, because of the quality of the light that day. Just boggled my mind. But what I'm trying to say here is you got to be open to the gifts that are being offered to you. We were out in Capitol Reef with Mitch DeBrowner. The sun went down, everybody's going, okay, gotta go. And I said, what are you talking about? Let's wait, let's see what happens. And this started to happen. But I think a story that kind of cements it even better, this idea of showing up for those gifts that are being presented, is this one. My friend Dalen, who asked me to photograph him, with Philadelphia, he had access to this gym, and I was photographing Dalen and having a good time and learning about how to be a people photographer, which is difficult for me. And after we're finished in this area, we've got this beautiful window light here. He pulls up this big old truck tire, like an 18-wheeler truck tire, and Marley, his daughter, sits in it. And she looks up at me, but I'm paralyzed because I'm not a people photographer. I have no idea how to make a people photograph. Yeah, can I cut her arms off? Is that the right thing to do? Do I wait for eye contact? What do I do? I mean, I was so paralyzed by my FUD, my fears, uncertainties, and doubts about what to do in this situation that I didn't make a photograph until about 10 or 15 minutes later when I made this image. And I looked at the LCD and I went, I think that's okay. Enough so that I said, I better keep going. And I made another one. And I made another one. The experience of photographing Marley was so powerful because it helped me to realize that, you know what, I am a people photographer. I need to stop worrying about what's right and wrong and the rules and all that stuff and just photograph the gift that was being presented to me. So I made that triptych and I gave it to Dalen and his wife as a gift. I don't remember one photograph I made of Dalen that day because the knowledge that I learned and the gift that was given to me that day was so much more powerful. Again, if you don't believe me and what I'm trying to share here, Bresson says it like this: a photograph was neither taken nor seized by force. It offers itself up. My question is, are you awake? Are you open? Are you present? Are you aware of what is being offered to you? What about rules? Well, I would ask you this question, or these questions. Whose rules? Who made them? And why do you believe them? Again, it's your vision. Now look, I understand the rules. I would like to maybe change or invite you to throw away the rules first and think about them maybe as guidelines rather than this is how you should. As a matter of fact, what I've been inviting clubs to think about is when you're having image reviews, I would encourage you to no longer allow the word should to be used in a discussion about somebody else's imagery. And rather maybe think about saying things like, might you consider, which is much more respectful of that person's vision and their imagery and what they're trying to do with it. Because again, who are you to impose your shoulds on somebody else's art or vision? So replace those rules with guidelines. Heavens forbid, I would not want, I don't go out with my mind full of rules as to how I'm going to compose. I compose based on what feels right. Which leads me to competition. And let me make it be very careful here and be very clear. Dan Sniffen is my best friend, and we did 40 tours together. He's a brilliant photographer with a style that's very uniquely Dan Sniffen's. But he also thoroughly enjoyed Photographic Society of America and achieved, and I don't know that whole space very well, but achieved some grand level of competency in that, which was competition. Who was his biggest fan? Me, because I knew that's what gave him great joy and satisfaction. I'm suggesting, though, if you are open to the things that I'm speaking about tonight, where you want to create art, or you want your photography to be an expression of who you are as a human being that I'm suggesting, then competition can sometimes get in the way because it would be one of those barriers that I'm talking about and that Freeman's talking about. Because now we're photographing just for that competition rather than whatever turns our head, wow, and all those things. And I think you can do both. You can be open to that wow, right? And make sure you're not missing those. But you can also be saying, hey, in the back of your mind, I've got a waterfall project. And I think tomorrow I'm going to go out and do just waterfalls. That's fine. But just be careful that you're not photographing for the judges, but maybe for you. Again, if that's what your choice, then that's where you find your joy. What I'd rather do is, and I think is so important, is to connect to my subject. And in this case, it might be humans that we photograph. Doggone it, we were supposed to be there. What is today, the 10th? We were supposed to be there. I think I was supposed to be leaving this week to be there for next week and for our workshop out at the Hideout Ranch in Shell, Wyoming. It's an absolutely amazing, amazing event that we do. And unfortunately, COVID didn't allow us to go this year, but we will go next year. And they have these wonderful riders who are available to us to photograph. But, as we got to know them over the course of the week when they were riding, getting ready for this moment when later in the week where we do portraits, that connection that I had with Lauren and Mel and knowing their names and treating them like human beings, and that great experience that we had allowed me to work with them to get images that I think are very good, for a non-people photographer, right? But when I went to New Zealand, man, I've been thankfully 3 times and we can't wait to go again. Absolutely, hands down, my favorite country outside of this country to photograph. But these images are all made very much from vision-driven trip. My first 2 trips there, I was, the first trip, I'm like, oh gosh, can I even make a good picture? That whole thing that you deal with, right? Because you traveled 1,000,000 miles. Do I know how to make a good picture? Well, I find all that FUD, the fears, uncertainties now. To the second trip to going, okay, I feel comfortable here, I'm okay. And then finally on that third trip, getting to the place where I'm allowing and open to whatever's being presented to me and making images that are appearing to me and calling to me rather than chasing them. So eliminating those fears, uncertainties, and doubts, again, they're real, they exist. But that's what I've been working the hardest on, is eliminating my feelings of fear, uncertainties, and doubts, whether that be I'm not a good people photographer, I don't know how to use flash or strobes. I'm trying to meet that more gently and say, okay, I don't know how to use a flash. I'll figure it out. I'll watch a video, I'll take a course, I'll do whatever I have to do. So I've been invited to take photographs of ukuleles and guitars and stuff from a friend I met who's now gifted me with 2 guitars and 2 ukuleles. He's in Taiwan. The instruments are made in China. And he gave me this, here I have $8,000 worth of instruments. And I'm like, oh crap, how the heck? I've never photographed stuff. I'm a landscape photographer. And so it's been really hard to travel the world with my ukulele, but I'm figuring it out. It was hard to learn about infrared and what am I going to do? How do I do infrared photography? But I'm figuring it out. Another one that I use in almost every presentation is this one because I think it's so powerful. Don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. I was at Zabriskie Point and there was a gentleman next to me. I'm 6'6", so I'm tall, or as I like to say, 5'18". Makes me feel shorter. But this guy next to me is 5'2", and he's looking up at me, and I could tell he's kind of quizzically looking up and like, what are you doing? Because I'm moving my camera. I'm not on a tripod. I'm moving it and I'm going click, click. And he's just thoroughly perplexed. But he finally gathers the courage and he looks down at me and he goes, what are you doing? And I look, I'm sorry, he looks up at me rather and says, what are you doing? And I look down at him and I said, well, I'm doing swipes, I'm doing intentional camera movement. And he looks back up on me and without missing a beat, it says these exact words. Well, that's kind of stupid. I kind of looked at him and I was like, wow, that's pretty bold for someone about 5'2" to say to somebody that's 6'6". So my first instinct was to whack him over the head and make him 5 foot. But there was a park ranger there. I didn't want to get kicked out of Death Valley. So instead, I turned my camera around because the second kind of human reaction would be this one. It would be, yeah, you're right. It is kind of dumb. I should wait till I get a stand of trees and I should go up and down on the, yeah, that makes more sense. So that's kind of the human one, is to, when somebody says, hey, that's stupid, you sort of go, okay, you're feeling uncomfortable, unsure whether you're doing makes any sense. But not me. I turned around my camera, I showed him the back of the camera, and I said, yeah, but look at me. I'm making patchwork quilts. And it was interesting because he went from that's stupid to that is so cool. And guess what he started doing? How do I do that? And I said, well, get yourself dialed in, you at a fifth or a fourth or a sixth, something like that, and do this. And he, oh, that's so much fun. That's so, so how important is it to not allow others to tell you what you should or shouldn't do? Do whatever you want to do. It's your vision. And don't be concerned about what others are doing. I'm the only one at this lighthouse that I showed you before at Pepemaquid, because that sunrise is reflecting on that window, and I'm the only one there. I show this image to Paul later in the day, and he goes, oh my gosh, I don't have anything that looks like that. Well, what do you got? And he pulls me up his image, and I went, oh my gosh, I don't have anything that looks like that. Well, that's the point. I don't have anything that looks like that, nor does he love mine, because he was drawn to the beautiful striations of rock with the lighthouse on the top corner, the beautiful sunrise happening, and given that colors of bands of color. It's a fabulous image. It's not better, or it's just different than mine. And mine's not better, it's just different than his. So what I would encourage you to photograph what makes your heart sing. That's all that matters, right? Photograph what makes your heart sing, what makes you say yes, what calls to you. So I had a chance to photograph this guy. So that's Maynard Ferguson. He was my childhood hero. I was photographing him because Maynard made my heart sing. I was the only one in the audience with a camera on a monopod. It was back in 2005, November, specifically 2005. By August of 2006, I figured out how to process a RAW file, because this was my very first digital camera after being a film shooter forever. I got it 2 weeks before the concert happened here at Central Bucks West, right here in Doylestown. So I didn't know how to process the file. But I was there photographing what made my heart sing. Man, I love Maynard. And then when I finally posted an image back on 2006, August 23rd, the next day, the first comment on that post was, that is so odd that you posted that image last night, because Maynard passed away last night. I was devastated. He's my childhood hero. I used to play along with his albums the best I could. I was no Maynard Ferguson, but I tried. Drove my parents crazy, because Maynard played in the upper register in the stratosphere, as we talked about, way high notes, and screech trumpet player. But I just happened to be there photographing him because, man, it made my heart sing. I have all of his albums. And here he died the day I posted that image, 6, 8 months later, 9 months later. And so Jeff Lashway, his piano player, joined photo.net and left a comment and says, that's one of the nicest photographs I've ever seen of my dear friend who I just lost, and and my band leader. So I got a hold of Jeff and I sent him a copy of this photograph. Again, what are we talking about here? Photographing what makes your heart sing. So let's see what happened with this. I sent Jeff the picture and said, thank you so much for the joy you've brought me. I'm sorry for your loss. And then it dawned on me, maybe the Ferguson family would enjoy the photographs that I made that night. So I got a hold of the tour manager, Ed Sargent, sent him the photograph, said, you can use these. Here's a release. Use them however you want, and please give them to the Ferguson family. Ed calls me back and says, hey, we're going to use them for the lanyard at the tribute concert for Maynard. We're going to use them for the poster for the tribute concert. He's a big time legendary jazz trumpet player. Really cool. How about that? I'm associated with Maynard that way. 3 months later, Ed called me and said, John, what you don't know is about 3 weeks before Maynard passed away, he finished playing what are now the last notes that he's ever played on an album. And that album is about to be released And we would love to use your image for the cover of that album. And so there I am on the cover of Maynard's album. Well, there's Maynard, but it's my photograph. And I'll remain with Maynard for the rest of my days, and it'll be forever. And the liner notes is covered by John Barclay. And that's cool and everything, but the point of the story is that when you photograph what makes your heart sing, you have no idea what's going to happen. So let's kind of wrap things up here in the last, let me take a look. I've got 12 slides left that'll go pretty quickly. As you master the technical aspects and develop your vision, right? Learn and understand what vision is. You've got to engage your heart. It's getting in touch with your emotions or your heart that will allow your images to sing. I think that's where the shift happens. So I would encourage you then to really start to listen to your feelings and then use those feelings in your work. How am I connecting? How am I relating? What is this making me feel? And a story I've shared before that others in here have seen before is this one. Again, I use some of these over and over again because to me, the feedback tells me that it's okay to use them again because they're so powerful. So I made this right answer of an image based on how I was feeling of being able to photograph Henryton, an old abandoned institution. And I had no more knowledge than that it was fun and cool to be there that day. So this is a perfectly viable HDR image. And then a friend of mine who was with me that day said, do you know what happened there? And I said, no, I don't. And she sent an article. And in that article, I learned the horrific atrocities that were perpetrated on these children who were institutionalized here. These were what were so-called throwaway children, children who had such disability that families just, it was a challenge to take care of them anymore. And so they gave them to the state to take care of. Well, the state didn't do a good job and closed this down because they abused them physically, verbally, sexually, and to the point of death, and to the point of burying some of these poor children out back. Why? Because nobody's going to find them anyways. They've written them off. Well, guess what happened? My feelings changed. I now had rage, new feelings, different than this image. I had rage, anger, shame. Why shame? Because I saw fresh, brand new teddy bears there, and I didn't realize why they were there until I understood the story. If I had gone there knowing that, it would have understood clearly. But now that I read about it, and I unfortunately have a connection to abuse in my family, and so rage. I am just angry rage now. And I kind of had to get through that and breathe. And then I went back and said, there's no way with this new knowledge, with my vision, with my life now being informed by new knowledge, changed my vision of life. And I went back and I reprocessed those images. And I even wrote something, which is hard for me to do. I don't write well, but the light of truth and a ray of hope for these poor children who were tortured by the people who used to inhabit these offices. So hopefully it's a pretty dramatic example of how feelings, and when your vision is informed and that vision changes over time, can inform your work. Does that happen with a tree? Yes. Does it happen that viscerally? No, of course not. Does it happen when you're photographing a person for a portrait session? It better. That connection that you're having with that person better inform that shoot, because if you can do that, that shoot's going to be way better than just them showing up with no interaction, no relationship whatsoever. See, engaging my heart with this beautiful young lady in Cuba is what it's all about. I saw her 3 years prior in the same shirt and the same pants 3 years later, because they don't have much. And I'm sure they use that outfit for as long as they can. And I had the heck of a time finding her house again because I had photographs of she and her mom that I wanted to deliver. And I found her and she ran out and gave me a hug because she remembered me. You know, again, 6'6", hard to forget, right? Pale white. I mean, that's engaging with your heart. I don't care whether it's a good or bad photograph. This photograph makes me happy. So let's finish with a couple of slides here in a story. There was a young intern type doctor in a Navajo Nation hospital. And in walks a Navajo man with, long hair and braids. And he's obviously got something wrong with him. And so the doctor's got his clipboard right. And he says, how can I help you? And nothing. The man just looks, the Navajo man just looks straight at him. It's like nothing. And the doctor's a little frustrated. And so he's thinking to himself, well, maybe this guy is, he's like a medicine man. And maybe, because they dance and they do that dance, and maybe he thinks that the dance is what's going to cause him. So the doctor finally says, maybe that's what I got to ask about. He says, to the doctor, he says, do you dance? I'm sorry, the old man looked at him and said, do you dance? And that's what got him thinking about that, right? And the doctor, of course, says, no, I don't dance. He says, do you dance? And the old man looked at him, he says, well, yeah, of course I dance. And then, of course, the young doctor looks back at him and says, well, could you teach me to dance? And the old man said, well, I can teach you to dance, but you need to feel the music and hear the music. So it's the same way with photography. I can teach you all about f-stops and shutter speeds and rules or guidelines and all those things, but you have to hear the music. You've got to feel and hear the music in order to make images that are going to be uniquely yours. Again, to summarize, that craft part is important. We do need to know about that so that we can maybe honor our vision with those tools. So one last sage piece of advice from my buddy Dan's mother. Bring your good, he would say at 15 years old, Mom, I'm just not having a good time. I don't like being at the party with all the adults. I want to go home. And she would say, son, you bring your good time with you. And of course I would get him even more mad, but she was right. Now that he's older, he realizes, you're right, Mom, you do bring your good time with you. So what have we covered tonight? We've said we need to master our craft. And part of that is learning to be still so that you can connect. Part of that is being open to whatever turn your head, allowing those images to call us rather than chase. Excuse me. Paying attention again to Ricky and what turns your head or makes you say, wow, or as I like to say, those moments of perception. Ignore or maybe throw away the rules and replace them with guidelines. Think about what Freeman has spoken about here in this concept of learning to see more deeply. Meeting and being gentle with these ideas of fears, uncertainties, and doubts that you have about where you're at or where you want to go with your photography. Maybe finally saying, yep, I'm going to engage my heart just a little bit more in this thing and see how that works. And trust that you do have a vision and trust in that. Trust the way that you see the world. And photograph ultimately what makes your heart sing. So thank you for being kind enough to come out tonight and spend your time here with me. I appreciate that. I'm honored by that. I hope something I've said tonight might have resonated with you, caused you to think maybe a little bit more deeply. I love the moments I've had with Dan over the years and with Cole and Chuck and these people who are brilliant photographers, and the opportunity that we have to have deep conversations about the process and how we show up to make photographs. Because to me, that's so much more important than the craft part. I mean, they're both important, but boy, what's changed my photography more than anything is understanding of how I show up. What is my process as a photographer? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here so I can see all of your faces as you come back on and turn your cameras on, because it would be lovely to see you and look at
Thank
some
you,
of these.
John. That was excellent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh, this is Carolyn. Just thank you. That was excellent. I don't know if anyone has questions that they want to ask at this point.
See, I'm looking at the comments. Thank you um, for your feedback. Uh-oh, I'm always worried about my anti-competition message. I agree, but many don't. For many, competitions are the reason for taking photographs. Again, Richard, I thought I was pretty clear, but this seems to always be, I always get pushback every single time. I want to be, if I wasn't clear enough, I'll try to do it one more time. If competitions are what brings you joy, so be it. That's not who I'm generally speaking to, is competition people. I'm speaking hopefully to somebody who might want to do a little bit more than that, because I still argue that competitions mean that you're having to pigeonhole your images to fit to somebody else's vision, and then you're getting a rating. Let me tell this story, because this is what, so I no longer judge, and I never will again. Because of this experience, I've tried to be nice to certain local clubs and do that. But here's my experience. I was sitting there, and I don't know how you do judging, but it sounds like numbers. But it was one of those where you had a dial and you hit a button, and the dial was 1 to 9, right? And so you had 3 judges. Sounds like I'm nodding. So it looks like people are nodding. You're familiar with this then, right? And it randomizes so you don't know which judge said which, right? So that's great. And so the first image comes up, and in my mind, people have spent time and they've poured their heart and soul and said, I'm going to risk my little soft underbelly and present this image for people to judge. That is a big deal. That's hard, because you're offering this up for people to criticize, and that's hard. And so I'm taking time and I'm going through, okay, I'm going to give 3 points for composition, 3 points for light, 3 points, I forget what the other one was. And then 1 point, my 10th point will be a wow factor. I'm trying to be mindfully aware of what these folks are presenting. Well, the other 2 judges go within 1 second, click, click. They've made that's a 9, a 4, whatever they've done. 20 seconds later, seriously, on the first image, I finally enter my number. And I'm sweating bullets at this point, because I realize I'm holding the whole night up, right? And the 2 judges are looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Pick a number. So the second image comes up. I took 10 seconds, which felt like eternity, because those guys went, and I'm like, okay, so that's got nice light. Nice composition. I love the way I'm feeling with this. Oh, that's great. And does that have a wow factor? Nah. Okay, I'll give it an 8. And the 2 judges again next to me are like, seriously, we're going to be here all night. Could you just move it along, Barclay? And so guess what? About 10 images in, what did I do? That's all I did, just like the other judges did. What an insensitive way to judge somebody's image that they've spent time and effort and heart and soul creating. And so it's over, we're having snacks and we're mingling around, and a woman comes up to me and she says, why did you give me a 4? And I said, ma'am, I don't know who you are, and the numbers are randomly generated. You have no idea what I gave your image. Oh, yes, I do, she says. I said, no, you don't, ma'am. It's not possible. I spoke to the other judges, and they told me what they gave me, and you gave me a 4. Now, I'm not proud of what I said next, because it wasn't my finest moment. But I meant every word I said. I just could have said it differently. But I was so angry at her for doing that because that was so rude. It was so inappropriate that she did that. And I said to her, I said, ma'am, if my 4 is that important to you, you should take up another hobby. And I meant every word of that, and I still do. And that's how I feel about competitions. You're allowing somebody to arbitrarily tell you whether you're good or bad. And I derive zero joy out of doing that. I did it for a little while. Here's my second story, and I'll be done with the soapbox, I promise. I have a beautiful flower image. It hangs in my bathroom. I love it. It reminds me of my mentor, Nancy Rotenberg, because it was taken with her. And I say, I'll do a competition. This is 20 years ago. I won the stinking competition. I won the whole thing. Best of show. Well, that was fun. I must be a good photographer. So what I did is the Churchville competition happened. And I said, I'll go to the big guns now. I'm going to bring that same stinking picture and I'm going to enter it into Churchville. It didn't even get juried into the show. Didn't even make it into the show, but it won the other one. So what did I learn from that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I love that image and it hangs in my bathroom. So that's my soapbox. I'm sure I still haven't convinced anybody, but again, what I said in that part of the dialogue was Dan Sniffen, best friend, PSA, loved doing it. And I was his biggest cheerleader. So if that's what you want to do, I will be your biggest cheerleader too. Because if that's your way to feel joy, who am I? Just like I'm saying about photography should be you and your images. Who am I to tell you how you derive joy? I'm not. So I am not telling you to don't compete. That is not my message. But I am telling you, be careful. Because I think it's the wrong message most times. Anyways.
I have a different take on competitions.
Okay.
I like them because you get input from judges and it helps it helps in the development of your photography.
So the only caution I would give you there is to make sure that that input doesn't sway you from your vision though, right? So that's fine. And I'm asked to give feedback on a workshop, right? But again, hopefully Eric and Sally, who were with me back in October, might give the input. I really try my hardest to say, might you consider, rather than you should do something. It should not be how I see the world should be. It should be their imagery, and they're doing fine all on their own. They don't need me. But like you're saying, if you're looking for some feedback, might you consider having put this off to the right side so that the bill of the duck is leading you through the frame? That's fine. That's perfectly valid feedback. But if you still feel like it doesn't meet with your vision of how you believe your images should be, I just invite you again to consider that you say, nah, thank you, like Cole did, but nope, that guy's got to be dead center bullseye because that's what feels right to me.
Good advice and inspirational.
Well, thank you.
Well, sure, John, either the judge gets it or the judge didn't get it. That's the way I see the competition going.
Say that one more time, please, James.
Either the judge got it or the judge didn't get it.
Good way to put it. And that's a great example for my flower, right? The first group said, hey, I get this, I love it. The second group said, I'm not a flower photographer. That's all that I learned from that. They just didn't like flowers.
Right.
And that's fine.
Would you respond to this comment here about your vision is an audience of one? Do you see it up there?
Let's see here. Is it a ways up here? Anti-competition?
Just below the anti-competition message.
1,000 likes may not be related to your vision. How should you expand your audience while maintaining your vision? Interesting. So, I see. That's your question, right, James? So what you're asking, right. Yeah. So yeah, the vision is all about me, right? Is what you're saying in my case.
Right.
But well, I guess that means it all depends, right? So if you're chasing likes, the question then would be, why am I chasing likes? To what end? And to me, there's like when DeWitt asks, when we're out in Molokai, why do you photograph? There is no right or wrong answer to why do you photograph. And
Right.
so my initial feeling to that is, if I am a working photographer making a living from photography, well, that's a different set of ground rules in that case, right? Because now the likes kind of matter, because I want to be able to sell images. So that guy that I kind of was wincing at that says I use 500 pics. So to expand my audience, well, I need to know who, because I come from 35 years of owning my own sales agency in the medical device industry. So you need to know who your market is, and you need to sell products that fill the needs in that market. Well, so if that's what I'm trying to do, if I need those 1,000, or I need to expand the audience for what I'm looking at, and that's driven by sales, well, then I'm going to have to probably operate in a different way. But if I'm just an artist, I just got to keep producing art that's honest work to me. And if it's liked, it gets liked. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't think that's going to cause me to change my doing honest work because I want to get more likes. I'm just going to keep doing honest work. So can you imagine Picasso does some abstract pointillism and he brings it down. Nobody's ever seen it before. And he brings a piece, opens up the corrugated, of course they didn't have corrugated probably, but takes off the wrapper, opens it up. He's at the pub. They've all had a few drinks and he goes, "What do you think?" I can imagine the reaction was, "That's horrible, Pablo. It's garbage. I mean, why would anybody like smeared crappy points? I mean, that's ridiculous. Go do something else." But what did Picasso do? Created a whole new style of painting because he stayed true to his vision as to what he wanted from abstract painting or pointillism or whatever
Yeah.
it was. Right?
Yeah, well, that was Picasso.
Yeah. And what's your point?
So we can all just stick to our private visions and
Right.
hope that people will get it.
Yep.
Or we can try and ask, so what is it about our vision that maybe needs more tweaking to make it more impactful on a larger audience? We're staying in our truth and our vision,
Yep.
but we're looking for something that will impact more than just me.
If that's what you choose to do, sure.
You don't choose that?
I don't choose to what? To have everybody like my work?
You're happy if you're the only person who ever likes your work.
That's who I'm doing it for, is me.
Right.
Yeah. When somebody else likes it, sure, it feels good and I like it. But and so why do I post on Instagram and Facebook? For business, to prove to people who might want to come on a workshop that I actually am a photographer, that it looks like I might know how to use my gear. And I do lectures like this so people know who I am and my point of view. And I make images first and foremost, primarily and solely for me.
Sure.
And I'm not going to deviate from that, James, to please you. I'm just not at this point in my career. But I understand, though, this is, we don't have time for the whole discussion, right? But look, we're all at different places in our career or in our path with photography. So I understand if you're a brand new photographer that maybe getting some guidance from a mentor, which I did. Dan, my best friend I talk about, was a huge mentor. And yes, he did that. When we get to this level where I'm talking about we're a little further down the road, I think. And we're a little more self-assured and confident of what we want to have or achieve with our photography. And so I am at that point where it's for me. And if I don't like it, then I'm not going to put it out there. And I'm certainly not going to make images just to please somebody else to fit into what they think is a beautiful photograph. And so if I don't get followers, okay, that's great. If I do and I grow and I have grown, then they must be liking what I do or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. So what is your thought? I mean,
I think there's some happy medium in between. The 1,000 likes of people who uh, really don't have a sense of what's a good photograph or a bad photograph,
that's good.
and you with your pure vision of what you want to do. If you want to make an impact in the world with your art, then you may want to pay attention to what it is that grabs people.
Okay. I'll consider that.
Well, you're doing well, so I don't want to rain on your parade. Congratulations, and your
You're not
photography is wonderful.
Yeah, you're not raining on my parade one iota. As a matter of fact, I enjoy the conversation like this because it allows me to think and ponder more about how I feel. Like I said, our vision is constantly growing, and your questions and your thoughts will cause me to think deeply tonight as I go to bed and talk to Cole. And I'm not done thinking about photography. It's changing all the time. Who else? We've dominated some of the time here. Anybody else? Nobody wants to jump in after that dialogue.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, there's,
I think it's fine.
this is great. There's a lot to think about that you've discussed tonight. So, and wonderful pictures, wonderful images.
Yeah, I just, maybe the only comment I'll make, or maybe it's an inquiry. So as I think about photography and vision, a lot of times maybe in a different vocabulary, it's what are you trying to communicate, right? As you make an image and as you process an image and then present it. And if that fairly communicates to the people who see it, whether they like it or not, I think it's still valid art. If what you presented doesn't communicate or doesn't communicate what you think it should, or what you're trying to communicate, then maybe the feedback would be helpful, right? But it really comes down to a vision is what are you trying to communicate? It's, yeah, you see something, you react to something, and now from that, you want to express something to other people. And the question is, do you have the skills to communicate that through your visual art?
I think that's well said. Yeah, you're right. Because if going back to what James was saying, I think that adds on to that concept, right? That like, I can't say you better than you did, if it's not communicating, and if I've failed as a photographer to communicate to you sadness in this image or whatever, joy, well then, okay, yeah, that feedback at that point would say, yeah, I didn't get that, John.
Like your image of the room was very sad.
Yeah.
That's what you were trying to communicate.
Yes.
And I might not say, oh, I love that, I want to hang that on my wall, right?
Yeah.
But it was still very effective as a piece of art, expressing exactly your emotions and your reactions to seeing that scene and knowing what it actually meant in reality.
So let's kind of think through James's point again here and kind of continue this dialogue a little bit. Then, so what would happen? So you might come to me, or James would come to me and say, I hear that you were trying to make that sad. It didn't work. I'm probably not going to say, what would you do? I'm going to go back and think about it for myself and process it and go, okay, how did I miss the mark on this? Yeah. So James, on that, I'm totally 100% with you at that point. Hey, okay, that feedback, but what I don't want anymore from somebody to say, if only you had lightened this, darkened this, put this in the center, but I don't want that. I want to be in control of those decisions of my art making and work harder to clean. So maybe that helps clarify.
Yeah, it's about the communication and whether people are hearing it or not.
Yeah. Who else?
I'd like to say something about competitions. This is Anita.
There we are. Okay. You're the competitions manager. Oh no, I'm in trouble.
No, that's wrong. I'm not. That's just, I'm not.
Okay.
Competitions I've had a difficult time with because I got such low scores sometimes that I quit photographing for months. And so I've gone in and out of putting images in the competition. And now I just put in whatever I want. I don't care what, I often don't even do the subject, the topic. But the problem is I don't get,
Rebel.
well, that we have an open category,
Oh, good.
but I don't get a feedback of how it feels or how it impacts a person. It's either I like it or I don't like it, or it's dark, or
Yeah.
So there's a technical critique, but it's seldom that someone tells me how the photograph makes them feel, or yeah.
There,
We need to bring that, excuse me, we need to bring that into the competitions, Anita. Absolutely.
amen.
The judges don't have time. They do not have time. In 2 seconds, what can you do?
Right.
Right.
But well, what I think, James, if I hope I can figure out what he's going to already say, but what you can do as a club amongst yourselves as friends and people who are trying to love each other in this joy of photography, James and Robert and Wayne,
Anita.
Ava and Fiona are, you have great photographers who can say to you, Anita, you said, right?
Anita, yeah.
Anita, they can say, you can now go to them because you've just gotten permission from James right away, and I bet Robert too, to go to them and say, please, I put this in the competition. They said it was nice. Can you give me better feedback about how this made you feel?
And
Yep.
James has made that possible. We have a image critique group once a month.
Good.
In small groups of club members, 5 of us maybe, and that's exactly what we do.
Hey, James, can I offer a suggestion to rename the group?
Yeah, please.
Image Celebration.
Yeah,
I mean that sincerely.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Critique implies that you're going to tell them what's wrong. Whereas
Right.
if you go at it from the perspective of image celebrations, you're going to celebrate everything they're doing right.
I love it.
By
Thank you.
virtue of what's not talked about, they're going to learn that, okay, maybe I ought to try this too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Just a thought. Anybody? Thank you, Jim, but you're not Jim. Giving your thumb up, Jim Wilson. You don't look like Jim.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Good.
Oh, good.
Words have meanings, right?
You do.
Okay, anything? I'm happy to stay as long as you want me to. It's been a good discussion. I appreciate the opportunity to have, I think to the point that Anita just made, and I'm thankful that James jumped on it, is without dialogue like that, Anita, the group can't respond. The group can't help in a really honorable way. And so those 2 little suggestions, a celebration, and you're never ever going to say you should in those celebrations. You're just going to say, might you consider, how would you feel if, and you're going to put your hand up, right? And you're going to say, how would you feel if you had, just move that? Does that help meet your vision a little better, Anita? And she would go, oh my gosh, I never thought about taking that branch out of it, or making it so that it read left to right versus right to left. I never would have thought about flipping it over. Oh my gosh, that didn't even occur. That type of stuff I have zero issue with, right?
Yeah.
But it's driven by her asking the question. I have a mentorship program I'm doing, and when they come to me and they say, John, I want your feedback, the rule is you have to tell me before we have a dialogue about your image what it is you wanted to accomplish with this photograph. I am not going to tell you whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, or any of that stuff. But once I understand what your vision was for that photograph and whether it worked or not, then we'll start from there. Because now I'm giving input that's focused primarily and solely on giving the feedback based on what I know he or she wants to accomplish with that photograph. That's very different than a judge looking at it and going, you should have removed that twig, you should have done. Why? You're not in my head. But if I give you my head, which takes more time, Anita, right? It's going to take more time in a group setting like this, or in your review session, or in your happiness image celebration session. Then give all that information about that image so that those people feeding back and say, well, I would consider doing that.
Good suggestion. Thank you.
You bet. Arvid, hey, you got to turn your mic off. Did we succeed?
Yes, yeah, I was writing you an email saying we are very much on the same page.
Good.
And I was recalling something that people in the club are pretty familiar with. I used to muss and fuss over which photo do I put in a competition? What will a judge think of it? What will others think of it? And I did it best mediocre. And then I said, to heck with it. I'm going to submit what really resonates with me, what I really like. I don't care if other people like it. I don't care if it follows the rules. And I became photographer of the year doing that. And that was not my aim whatsoever.
Isn't that cool? Well, it's kind of like what happened to my buddy Dan, right? He was exhausted, had no interest to photograph on the Palouse of the Smokies, and hands down, it was like stunning set of images. Yep, same thing. Well, good, Arvid. Thank you.
Yes.
Didn't mean to pick on you.
In the aforementioned print critique group, we do maintain an attitude of positivity when we go into it, rather than a negativity and suggesting what somebody should do or what we would have done. You start by observing what it is that you feel good about in watching their image.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done. And please, I hope you didn't think I assumed that you were. That was not. I was just talking about the word critique and just making sure and being concerned.
Yeah, agreed.
Sounds like you've got an excellent group already focused on the right things. Good work.
We had to evolve in that direction, actually, but
Well, that's okay. Good. Well, it sounds like you've got members who are interested in, growth.
yeah, absolutely.
That's a good thing. Well done. Carol, it's so nice to see your smiling face. Fiona, I can see your smiling face, but it's, a static photograph of you, but it's good to see you. But who did I miss? There's somebody, Lois, of course. My gosh, Lois, I've probably known Lois in this group longer than anybody else. Yeah, Lois and I go like, Lois, maybe is it 30? Well, no, it can't be 30. It's got to be a good 25 years ago. You're muted. I can't hear you. Where is she?
Maybe she left.
No, Lois is there. Here she is.
Okay, I think it was around 2005, 2004.
That's
2000.
about right, because that's when I started. That's when Nancy Rotenberg said you're going to start taking over the workshops up on the Poconos. It was 2000.
Yes, and that's when we also drove up together to the Adirondacks.
That's right. Oh my God. What's her name?
Phil.
Yes. That was a fun trip.
Yeah.
And of course, Eric and Sally, who were down in the Smokies, which we had a good time.
Oh, that was a good time.
Hey, Sally, I really enjoy your Instagram feed. I'm waiting for Eric's feed. When are you going to do an Instagram feed?
Right now, Facebook is all I can handle.
Oh, and I'm terrible at Facebook, so I'll go out there and check your feed on Facebook, Eric. All right, well, we're losing folks. I guess maybe that's my cue, right?
Great, that was excellent. I guess it is time to wrap it up maybe, but thank you so much. It was
You're
a
welcome.
wonderful presentation.
And thank you. I was just I'd like to try to honor, Ronnie Chason said, always highly, oh, good. Thank you, Vicky. And Ronnie's a good friend and we love her to death. Thank you. Oh, very nice comments. Thank you so much for the kind feedback. And if I'm rolling over one that said, you were the worst speaker ever, I'm just going to ignore that one. Lois says, John, that was terrible again. Oh, no, I'm kidding, Lois. But hey, enjoy. Please be safe out there. It's crazy times. And I hope, maybe in a year or so, workshops will get back into gear. I will get, what time is it? Yeah, I should have time. If I don't get it tonight, I'll get it tomorrow. But the lecture notes and a thank you note and links to things that you might be interested that I'm involved with. And then the free ebook that I put together, Photograph What Makes Your Heart Sing, as my thank you for enduring through with my crazy ideas of photography, James.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Good night,
Rob,
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks,
Good
John.
night. Thank you.
Bye, John.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye,
Good
everybody.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Good to see you again, John.
take good care. Bye-bye.